use of a taser, and you know, hopefully that's something that the cameras would fix if we get to the cameras. But it's one of those things that I mean, the whole point of tasers was to prevent deaths, and so maybe that's not the case, and so obviously it needs to be looked at, and I'm definitely not an expert on it, but it does seem like taser has a point. So I don't see the point of banning it, but certainly some of these should be looked at. That's all I can say.
I'm certainly not an expert on tasers either, but I think the police have to use a collection of tactics and equipment that makes sense for any given situation. I think a taser probably would have saved, what was his name, Terrell Franklin? Or Terrence Franklin, sorry. I think if they had had a taser to use in that situation, he would still be alive today, unless he had an underlying heart condition, which was aggravated by the use of that taser, which I think I remember reading is the case in a lot of the deaths associated with taser use, but Michelle would probably know a lot more than that about that than me.
We'll talk about it later.
Great. Anyway, I think that we have to really look seriously at all the non-lethal options that police have to deal with violent criminals, and I think tasers probably should still be considered, but I'll hold judgment on that until I hear from you.
Read some more.
Yeah, I don't have much of a different answer than that. I'm not, you know, I don't know if I have a strong opinion. I'm worried about the use of tasers, and I would say that I would seriously look into it and sort of gauge exactly, you know, what it is we're trying to accomplish with them if we're going to continue to use it. And are we getting the proper training? Are we using it properly? I'm sort of worried about anything that's being used, whether it's being used properly.
I would say they have an issue with, first of all, guns. And years ago they used billy clubs. And if it protects the police, if they can use tasers, I would say it's another issue that they have to be very careful in all three issues of, you know, if they're going to shoot somebody or use the billy club or taser them or restrain them any other way. You know, it's all the issues that we have to contemplate. And I wouldn't take away from the tasers, but I sure wouldn't want them to use one on me or anybody up here.
Okay, I'm not an expert on tasers or any other form of weaponry, unfortunately. So I don't know where they fall on the, the use of force continuum. But I have a concern though about gun-shaped tasers, and I don't know if those kind are used in Minneapolis. But if you may recall, a few years ago, there was an incident on the BART system in San Francisco, where the officers, they had a gun on one side and the taser, which was shaped like a gun, on the other side. And the officer at least claims, I don't know whether he's lying or not, but he claims that he intended to pull the taser, but he pulled out the gun and shot the suspect.
Oscar Grant.
Right. Okay, thank you for reminding me the name, but I remember.
Fruitvale Station.
I just remember that. I thought,
He was not a suspect.
Okay, well, for whatever reason, the policeman thought he needed to be tasered. I think that there needs to be a way of distinguishing a taser from a gun very quickly, so a mistake like that doesn't happen again. Also, there's another technology that I might like to propose, and it's like a quick drying foam that they use in nuclear facilities, where the use of a gun could damage equipment. It's just a quick drying foam that immobilizes the suspect.
Before I give you a straight answer to your question, let me just remind folks of the context I put out before. For anybody who wasn't here when I spoke on some of these topics before, in reducing police misconduct and allegations of police misconduct, I see three key important things, each of which is a C. The three C's. One, cameras. I absolutely support putting an on-body camera on every single officer in the Minneapolis Police Department. In places where it's been implemented, we've seen it reduce allegations and actual incidences of misconduct dramatically. Two, cultural shifts. Making sure that every officer feels empowered and obligated to police, no pun intended, their fellow officers, to use peer pressure to keep officers in line. And three, a committee, an oversight committee. And the current one, I'm willing to give it a little more time, but so far, as I said earlier, I'm unimpressed. With that context in place, I do support allowing the police department to have tasers and to use tasers as part of the continuum of force. I think we can all think of times when if an officer has a taser and a firearm, if they're able to use a taser to resolve a situation, that's a lot better than just being stuck with that firearm. But I hope it's coming through that just because I'm saying tasers is part of the continuum of force, that doesn't mean I'm saying, yeah, do whatever you want. No. Cameras, culture, and committee would oversee the use of tasers and everything else in the police department's continuum of force arsenal.
So I am in favor of rational, evidence-based policies that are within the consent of the governed. Any sort of policy or government ordinance or whatever that is not within our consent is illegitimate, and that's found in the Declaration of Independence. I believe that all use of tasers in our city should, if it's continuing, should be transparently published, and there should be reports made on whether it was effective or not. And also, I believe that the citizens of Minneapolis should be the ones deciding themselves how we secure ourselves, how our police officers that are sworn to protect and serve us actually go about doing that. And so we already have, like I said, the Pirate Party has a website, blackbit.mnpirateparty.org, where you can sign up as a citizen of this city and decide how you would like to be governed and offer proposals on how to change city ordinances. And also I just want to mention that I'm not in favor of the police chief making these decisions. I'm not in favor of a gang of 14 people deciding how everyone in Minneapolis is secured. And also I do have some issues with surveillance with cameras being on police officers because of facial recognition issues and plate scanners. And that's kind of scary. So I don't know if that's a good thing.
On banning the use of tasers, I am inclined to support that idea of banning them. I haven't studied the issue beforehand, although I have a fair degree of confidence in Michelle's presentation. Sometimes if the cops have a toy that they're just going to abuse, then you just got to take it away from them.
Take their guns away. There's a question right here.
I just want to say, how many more questions would people like to take? I think one or two maybe, because there's a time for the candidates to wrap up. Any sense? Don't want to tax your patience, but this is also interesting. So two more? Two more good for people? Okay. Thank you.
Hi, Will Watkins. I represent North Minneapolis. I just want to mention that there's a disproportionate amount of level 3 sex offenders that are placed in North Minneapolis. And I'd just like to know what the candidates would do to work with government agencies or Department of Corrections to help decentralize the inmates that are being released into these concentrated areas.
Come first. Come full circle? All right. I'll get it right this time. Yeah.
Okay, I'm not sure, truthfully. I agree that I've heard that the sex offenders are definitely concentrated in one area, and my understanding is a lot has to do with the fact that housing is simply cheaper there, and that's all they can afford. I'm not really sure how to go about changing that. It would be nice to move them around so they're not so concentrated. Although I've also heard that when sex offenders do reoffend, they don't necessarily offend in their own neighborhood. So I'm not sure that it causes a problem for the neighborhood they're offending in. I also tend to think that it's violent offenders that tend to cause more of a problem because there's a lot more of them. But that's not what the question's about. And so I'm not sure. I guess I don't really have an answer. It's something we need to look at more. Sorry, I just don't have an answer on that at this point.
I don't really know enough about it to make an intelligent comment on it either. So I guess I'll make a stupid comment. I did seem to recall them being released commonly to where they used to live, and that could still be the case. Although I don't think it's right that they're concentrated in any one area. There's an actual choice to make to have them in different parts of the city. I think it probably makes sense to put them in halfway houses. Just about anywhere in the city would do, as long as you don't have too many NIMBYs stopping that. But it's a problem we have to deal with, and certainly dealing with sex offenders is something that should be shared across our boundaries. How we do that, I'm not sure.
I do have a strong feeling that there's too much concentration of this kind of thing on the north side, and I would work with state and county officials about seeing that there's change. Obviously, there are probably issues that I am also not aware of about where and why they locate them in certain areas, but I would definitely work on this issue.
Well, one reason is it's a dumping grounds. In North Minneapolis, you're on a bus line, and they put them there because they're easy places to live. I got one dumping ground in my neighborhood too. I'm over in Chicago and Franklin. That's probably worse than yours. So this has been going on for 20 years, and we have hundreds of phone calls a month just to get them out, the drug dealers out of our neighborhood. But they continue to come back. We have police patrols, and the reason why is that we're close to downtown, and basically everybody knows that where the drug dealers are. Go to Chicago and Franklin, go to Lyndale and West Broadway. You got shootings over there, you got killings, you got drug dealers, and we're trying to get rid of it. And that's one of my main concern is getting rid of this crime. And there's a lot of crime over there, and the police aren't really doing the job because they say they can't arrest these people because they got legal rights also. So your area is not the same. You don't see them in the rich areas, do you? You don't see them any place else but on our neighborhoods. So the police need to do a better job.
Well, I believe part of the problem may be beyond the city's control, except as a form of moral persuasion. The truth is that most landlords will not rent to somebody who is on the sex offender list or even somebody with a felony. And it oftentimes isn't even a matter of having enough money to pay the rent. They just are so scared of either what other people think or of actual reoffenses. And this is a real moral problem because even criminals, once they're out of jail, do need a place to live. And it's just an intractable solution. I don't really know what to say except to try to maybe morally persuade people to give these individuals a second chance, and at least, maybe watch them closer or something, but let them live somewhere.
I'd want to look at the underlying way that we're dealing with sex offenders. Well, I'd want to see if a person is posing a threat of repeating that revolting, horrific conduct, then I'd want to see what sort of remedies there are to keep that person locked up. I say this as a father of 2 small kids. I am pretty hardcore when it comes to keeping people locked up for that sort of thing. I'll err on the side of locking them up rather than giving them a second chance. And so, in the vision I have for the approach to dealing with this problem, if someone is living in a halfway house or in an apartment to get back on their feet, it's because they aren't posing a threat again, in which case I think it's an easier sell across the city to distribute those folks more broadly. But if there's a threat that somebody's going to be a recidivist, hell no, I don't want them in my neighborhood, and I don't want them in yours either, Will, because that's not fair.
So I really don't know enough about this issue to say anything wise, and instead of saying something stupid, I'm going to simply say I do know that there are situations where people are put onto the sex offender list for doing things that you shouldn't be put on that list for. For instance, public urination or something like that. I've heard it has been something that has put a lot of people on to that sort of list, and that's really putting people in a horrible spot. But to answer your question, I really don't know, and I will be looking up this issue, and so later tonight I hope to post on Twitter a response, but I just don't have one right now. So Captain Kurtis is my Twitter.
Well, I would look at, or I'd ask the Department of Corrections what's behind the concentration. I'd like to find out why it's happening, and not just speculate on it. On apartment applications, we might try a ban the box on that in that area. I think some years ago we had housing ordinance or a rental application ordinance was considered. I don't remember if it was passed. I think not. That prohibited landlords from collecting applications from people and collecting their $15 application fees, when in a lot of cases they had no intention of renting an apartment to you. It should be a first come, first serve. And that's usually how it is, actually, if it's, I mean, I've always been treated like that, but, and then, everybody should get that consideration. So if you're qualified to rent an apartment, you're the first to show up, you should get the apartment, and you shouldn't be getting this runaround. And but anyway, that's a little bit off topic here, but,
the psychology of sex offenders, it's probably way beyond my learning or knowledge. I can give you an example from my neighborhood, which has also been a dumping area for sex offenders that have been released. Normally what would happen is a certain block area would get a notification, police would come out, talk about it, what was happening and whatnot. Lately, I haven't heard a thing about that, so I don't know if that policy is now over or how you find out if there's a sex offender in your neighborhood.
I think this is the last question, is that right?
Yes, it is.
Okay, great.
Hi there, my name's Bill. I've got we brought up the May 10th incident a while back, and it's instructive on many levels, and to more or less the degree we all agree that there were obviously problems, there were issues, and lots of room to improve on the police agency's behavior and the investigation. But I'm bringing it up now because right after that incident, RT, only hours after that incident, RT Twittered how thankful he was for the cops and how he would already seen them. And gosh darn, thank you for them. A terribly unobjective